Nearly as dead east as you can get in Hyrule, tucked away between the Yomizuke and Apogek Shrine, lies a little rocky cove. There isn't anything special to this cove. It doesn't even have a name. It's between a lot of named areas, but it's disconnected from them. The closest you could attribute it to is Horon Lagoon, but even then I wouldn't call it that. Really, the only notable parts of this area are its cool wind gusts, a couple Korok seeds, and it happens to be my favorite location in the entire game. There are two big reasons as to why it's my favorite. The first is I just like how it looks. I like these rocky marine coves. They're pretty unique from other places in the world. They make me nostalgic. It's just pretty to see the rocks on the water. The more complicated reason is that this area, to me, embodies what I have really loved about Tears of the Kingdom, which, to summarize in one sentence, is the game's dedication to the little things while playing. This dedication is something that was very much present in Breath of the Wild. That game's map was similarly filled with these little spots that were relatively meaningless aside from really to add personality to the world. However, I think Tears of the Kingdom is such a vast upgrade over the former in this regard that it has ended up being one of the standout elements to me. It's worth mentioning as well that when I refer to the little things in this game, I'm speaking both in the world design and mechanics. Breath of the Wild was a very grandiose game, and rightfully so. It pushed a lot of boundaries in terms of what an open-world game is capable of. It had one of the strongest maps out there, and this was primarily achieved through a vast array of recognizable landmarks. I think Breath of the Wild's mission statement could be best described as achieving that old famous quote of, "Do you see that mountain? You can climb it." The game was about seeing something and going to it, with very little guiding you there aside from your own drive and interest. It pulled this all off with extreme mastery. There aren't many games that are quite capable of capturing the same feelings of exploration that Breath of the Wild did. However, looking back, while the game was incredible, to achieve this great landscape, it sacrificed a bit of the details. There were mostly only shrines and Koroks to find in terms of anything that had some meaning. There were enemy camps scattered, but they usually offered you like 5 arrows or a weapon that would only really last you a little while anyway. This led to that when areas didn't have a shrine attached to them, they felt less endearing and more just like filler when analyzed from a more critical lens. This led to a very useful groundwork for a world that Tears of the Kingdom expanded upon. It kept that same grandiose feeling while also getting a lot more involved in the world. Because they were able to remix the already existing template, the many years of work spent on the game was spent filling the map with just a lot more meat to chew on. There are caves, wells, developed enemy fortresses, more people to interact with, and of course all the classics return as well, with shrines, Koroks, and the smaller enemy camps. All of these feel a lot more substantial because they are more or less will always offer some sort of meaningful reward. Caves will always offer you a bubble gem to find, which can be exchanged for various rewards when finding the right NPC, for an example. They are also packed with chests or enemies to fight and harvest their resources as well. Caves also feature a lot of important unique flora to find, like bomb flowers or bright blooms, which will prove invaluable as you progress throughout the game. All this is accompanied by some caves also featuring hidden armor caches that will grant you a piece of some armor set, ending up in making the player want to find caves. Everything you can find here is something that has genuine value, and while sure, at hour 90, maybe a couple bright blooms or Horiblin horns aren't the most enticing of a reward, the scattered substantial pieces like armor will keep you coming back, searching for more holes in the wall. Speaking of, because caves feel substantial, this innately makes things like mountains or inclines feel more enticing to explore. After all, a cave is probably going to be embedded in some sort of terrain like that, which rewired my brain while playing to view mountains from all angles in hopes I could find something to spelunk in and find those juicy valuables. This was a very important addition to the game. I really think they rounded out my personal grievances with exploration in the last when I thought about it from a gameplay perspective. They add depth to the map, both literally and figuratively, and finding one is always another one of those fun little moments. There are of course other massive additions to the game's world, like the entirely new Sky Islands. These are pieces of terrain that fill the atmosphere that are almost all like their own little puzzles to solve. Similar to caves, they also offer some sort of genuine reward for visiting them, the majority of which will feature a shrine quest that gives you a Light of Blessing for completion, and many house a device dispenser which grants a plethora of Zonai devices. Another similarity to caves is that these Skylands also feature their own flora and fauna to find, like the Sundelions, which can help you cure your gloomed hearts in a pinch. While the Skylands themselves don't tend to have armor pieces on them, they very often will house a treasure chest that will give you a map that shows you where to find a piece of armor. Which actually leads me into this final major incorporation to the map that I'd like to cover. The depths are a massive cave system underneath Hyrule, which basically end up as an entirely extra world map. The depths are filled with things to find. There are enemy mining outposts that hold Zonite deposits, Yiga camps that grant you new schematics, abandoned mines or groves that will grant you usually some nostalgic piece of armor. There are also chests scattered throughout that offer these very useful either entire battery upgrades or pieces of them. You'll have to scout around for light routes to actually see your way around the depths, because without having them activated, the area is pretty much pitch black, forcing you to find some alternative means of light like the bright blooms I've mentioned earlier. The enemies in the depths are also generally more challenging than on the surface, with almost all of them being gloom variants of the standard enemies. The primary difference here is that when a gloom enemy damages you, they corrupt your max HP as opposed to merely hurting you. This requires you to either find a light root to cure up your gloom hearts, or eat some food cooked with those Sundelions to cure a handful of them as well. This is just another example as to how the game ties together its 3 different layers. These more challenging enemies are worth it though, because they're usually going to be defending Zonite deposits. The Zonite deposits are arguably what ended up being the most important thing there is to find in the depths for me. This is because they can drop large Zonite, which can be used very efficiently to gain extra battery, and the standard Zonite is your primary resource for the auto builder, which opens up so much experimentation and fun to be had that I guess I have to talk about the new abilities. With the shift into Tears of the Kingdom, Link has lost all of the old Sheikah Slates runes, so say goodbye to the old and welcome in the new. It's okay though, because the new roster of runes enable so much mechanical depth and experimentation that it makes the old selection feel like a tech demo, and that this is what the real game was meant to be. I'm gonna kind of skip over Recall and Ascend here, but by no means take that as me diminishing their importance. They consistently have ended up being extremely useful and powerful tools throughout the entire experience of the game. Recall opens up a lot of options in terms of how to engage with the land and combat, and Ascend provides so much quality of life in what has ended up being a very vertical game. These two are just the most straightforward abilities in the game compared to the other 3, those being Fuse, Ultra Hand, and Auto Build. Fuse is potentially the most elegant solution I could have possibly imagined Breath of the Wild's durability debate. For a game designed around scavenging, weapons having durability makes perfect sense. This discourages just using the same thing through the whole game, and always keeps you on your toes in terms of what your loadout can be. This keeps things fresh and generally leaves most combat situations feeling relatively unique from each other. However, it caused some big issues. Weapon rewards just didn't feel meaningful since they would just break in a couple of encounters. It also made combat feel not that worthwhile to engage in. If an enemy isn't going to drop something you care about, and you may lose your cool sword, why would you fight when you could just walk past them instead? Well, Fuse answers this by doubling down on the scavenging identity. Enemy drops are now meaningful, while also removing a lot of the anxiety in actually using your weapons. For those unaware as to how it works, the Fuse mechanic allows you to attach pretty much anything that isn't literally a piece of the world to your equipment. In practicality, this means your shields, weapons, and arrows. The most basic application of this is what actually ends up being a big problem solver to durability. It's that you can increase the attack of pretty much any random weapon into a very powerful tool of destruction. What you'll end up most commonly attaching to weapons for this purpose are the horns that monsters drop. Every monster has its own horn varying between each tier of the monster as well. This is what ends up solving the biggest issues between monster drops not mattering and combat not being worth it. Now, no matter what, a monster that's about on par with your level in the game is going to drop a horn that lets you create a useful weapon. In turn, this also means that you're constantly using these drops to make new weapons over and over, which returns back to the scavenging identity. And now that every monster has a useful drop, there's no reason, aside from saving some time I guess, to avoid combat. You'll be getting gear that is either on par or slightly better than your current gear, and whatever excess drops and loot is there, it's just on top. However, that's just the most basic application of Fuse. Weapon plus horn equals big damage is very useful, and it's what my no creativity brain ends up doing the most. However, Fuse opens up a lot more opportunities for outside-the-box combinations. First, while this isn't even that wild, it offers a lot more ease of access to utilizing the various elemental attributes in combat. No longer do you need to search for a fire sword, you can just take a sword and attach a fire item to it, and now you have a fire sword. The entire class of old magic wands are now replaced by just jamming one of those gems to your weapon. This allows for a keen gamer to, if they so choose, constantly be ready to take advantage of an enemy's elemental weakness. You could always have electric gear to use on a wet enemy, for example. There are more out there options as well. Stick 2 spears together to get an extremely long-range weapon, or stick a minecart to your shield to have a skateboard whenever you want. This even further takes that scavenging and makes it feel more like a genuine part of the game's DNA. You can constantly scrounge up some combination of item plus gear to solve your problems, and that's without even necessarily fighting normally. Furthermore, the ability to do all of this with arrows means that you no longer need to stockpile a bunch of random arrow types. If you need an arrow that explodes, just stick a bomb to it as opposed to needing a bomb arrow. This culminates in a large amount of little interactions all flowing together to create a much more fluid experience in combat. There are wildly more options to take when engaging a situation, and if Breath of the Wild was aiming to have every fight feel subtly unique, then Tears of the Kingdom blows this out of the water. It also makes combat just more satisfying, as you're consistently rewarded for it, rather than leaving a fight with the feeling that all you did was waste durability. While Fuse may greatly expand your options, it's most part only going to be felt in combat. Ultra Hand, on the other, hand, expands the entire scope of options throughout the game as a whole. I'm not fully sure how to talk about Ultra Hand properly without leaving out details, because in a lot of ways, it feels like Ultra Hand is why Tears of the Kingdom exists. I don't know if I've seen a mechanic that is designed to create such emergent gameplay exist in still a designed space. Ultra Hand lets you stick pretty much anything in the world to anything else. Logs, planks, stone, whatever. This alone is pretty fun. You can make your own bridges, can cross terrain with more ease. But where it really shines is with the Zonai devices. The Zonai devices in and of themselves are all pretty simple. A wheel that rolls forward, a fan that blows and will push against itself. All that standard stuff. As you combine them though, all of these simple machines combine together to create complex contraptions. The innate simplicity of each device is valuable though, because it makes them all work together in a very intuitive way. Once someone masters and understands how these work together, they can very quickly start developing their own creations, and the limits of what you can make are so broad that I feel like I can relatively confidently say there are no limits. So long as all the pieces fit and work together, if you can think it, you can probably make it. This is how I was able to create my own little war vehicle. It's a simple two-wheeler with all the sides except the back covered, and it's fitted with 3 sets of beam turrets and a stabilizer in the back so it all stays upright, and I can effectively use it for combat. Developing this vehicle was really engaging. I've never been someone who has the best creative juices, but even still I was able to design something like this just because of how natural it feels. I really need to emphasize that Ultra Hand is the heart of Tears of the Kingdom. This is where, more than Breath of the Wild could even dream, Tears of the Kingdom will have every person's playthrough be fundamentally different. It all lies in how they use Ultra Hand, and I really want to stress that it can appeal to every type of gamer. Even those with no creativity can make use of it, and just build the most practical possible creations for navigation, or the game provides its own templates for you to just plop into your world. Ultra Hand is also the peak of creating those little moments that this video is founded upon. When I made my truck and was filled with all the pride involved in seeing it actually function and take down an enemy camp, you bet your ass that was a memorable moment. But in the grand scheme of the game, it was just something small. There's no big cutscene, no staged event. It was just something that I realized I could do, and I did it. This happens all the time, even outside of creating complicated vehicles. There's so much value in how Ultra Hand allows problem solving to be entirely open-ended. I opened this section by describing how it could be used to create your own bridges and ramps, and even after my nearly 100 hours of playing, that still creates a lot of satisfaction for me. It feels like I'm solving the game in my own way that isn't even intended. There's also the value in how it can be used alongside the other runes in the game, putting a flat piece of whatever over a ridge to give yourself something to ascend up to, or holding something in the air, dropping it and jumping on it, then recalling it back up into the air. Both of these are small and can happen dozens, even hundreds of times while playing, and they never get old. They constantly feel like I'm breaking the game in my own unique way. As I've kind of hinted at earlier, Ultra Hand is also another avenue for making combat something the player has a lot more agency over. A lot of the Zonai devices are built explicitly for murder, and in a pretty vast variety of ways. You've got cannons, flamethrowers, lightning rods, the whole run of it, which can be stuck into any of your contraptions for use in combat. It's nice just being able to slap down a couple of murder machines ahead of a fight and have them follow you into battle and apply some extra pressure to enemies. Realistically, if someone desires, they can skip fighting altogether and leave it up to the machines. And how you choose to do this, you're given plenty of options. You can place down the Death Roombas, as me and my friends call them, and just have them wreak havoc among a camp. Or maybe you just design a trap, group up all the enemies, and get them stuck and kill them there. The point I'm really trying to drive in here is it's your choice. And seeing these choices put into fruition create those little moments of satisfaction. You can also go way above and beyond, even further than my battle truck, and build machines of war like orbital cannons or fully armed mechas. The Auto Builder is a pretty simple mechanic that allows you to instantly recreate any one of your favorite 8 machines, a vast selection of pre-designed schematics, or any of your 30 most recently edited machines. I really appreciate the Auto Builder. Without it, I think there would be a lot of value lost in the entirety of Ultra Hand. Things you design are intentionally disposable. They disappear when you enter a shrine, or even if you just leave them off screen for long enough. You are not meant to worry too much about them because they are just tools. However, if everything you built just disappeared like that with no way of recovering them, there'd be a lot of agony involved in designing more intricate machines. After all, it sucks to put a lot of time and resources into something like that and only get to use it a single time. And that's where AutoBuild comes in. It allows you at a moment's notice to pull your inventions into the world from the void, either by using nearby parts or that Zonaite I talked about like 4 pages ago. While AutoBuild helps assist in making the process of designing things a lot less of a headache, it also actually helps improve the other little moments in Tears of the Kingdom even more. This is how it is allowing the game to implement more rewards into the world. I mentioned it a while ago, but throughout the depths there are both substantial abandoned mines and Yiga camps to find and pillage. These tend to reward you with both a battery upgrade and, more importantly, a new schematic for your Auto Builder. These schematics range from things like vehicles to more general options, like a pre-assembled spring that you can just stick anywhere in the world for a quick boost. These are always a very engaging reward to find, as primarily they're going to be very useful, especially for someone who doesn't want to design their own. Similarly, since the Auto Builder uses Zonaite, this makes the process of going to mine some Zonaite while tracking down enemies in the depths also feel rewarding. It should feel like busy work, but a lot of the time it goes by both so fast and I end up stumbling upon a lot of other stuff while doing it that in the end I feel very happy with my time spent and end up with a lot of fuel that directly allows me to have fun with the Auto Builder. All of the runes in this game just lend to so many emergent concepts and situations while playing. I am constantly being presented with new things to find and do, and it still feels like there's so much left for me to explore in just the mechanics of the game. If Breath of the Wild was designed around that "you see that mountain, you can climb it" quote, then Tears of the Kingdom was designed around the idea of if you think you can do it, you probably can. It's not 100% perfect, but it's close enough. And by now, you're probably a little confused as to why or how any of this ties into that little cove I talked about at the start. Well, I think all of this is embodied by that cove, in it being such a small, seemingly unimportant part of the game. As I said at the start, there's not much to find there beside itself, but because of how deep the rest of Tears of the Kingdom has ended up, with so much to find and explore, so many of those little moments, it loops back into those locations feeling like a reprieve from the constant overflow of information, and in turn, They end up their own special little moment. A moment to just take in the atmosphere, enjoy the environment around you. There are a lot of opportunities to do this admittedly, but everyone will find their own that feels special to them, and they're all just as important as everything else filling the reaches of Hyrule. I've intentionally left a lot of details about the game out of this video, because exploring all of those little moments that I've been repeating over and over about is the magic of the game.